The scariest part about stalkers isn't when they follow you. It's when you finally realize how long they've already been watching. I used to laugh at stories like that, until it happened to me. At first, everything felt normal, just another part of life I didn't question. But the night I realized I wasn't alone in the way I thought, my stomach dropped. I never thought something as innocent as a quiet roommate could turn into the most terrifying discovery of my life. And the truly terrifying question: how many nights had he been watching me before I found out? Tonight, we're diving into true stalker horror stories that actually happened. So stick close and keep watching till the end to find out what happened, before it was too late. But before we start, make sure to subscribe or follow so you never miss any new chilling releases. If you're enjoying the content, hit like, drop a comment, and share this video. Let's see how many of you truly love this kind of episodes. Now here's your challenge. One of the stories you're about to hear might not be real. It could be completely made up, or maybe all of them are true. Watch till the end, try to spot the fake, and leave your guess in the comments. And as for last episode's fake story, it was story number 1. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And now, let's dive into the darkness together. I've carried this story for years, and I still catch myself looking over my shoulder because of it. I don't know if writing it down will help or just dig the scar deeper, but maybe someone else can take something from it. This happened when I was 21, living alone for the first time in a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of my college town. The building was old and quiet, mostly graduate students and a couple of older tenants. Rent was cheap, but the street was poorly lit and always felt a little too empty at night. At the time, that didn't bother me. I was young, independent, and thought bad things happened to other people, not me. The first time I noticed him, it was late, around midnight after my cafe shift. I was walking home, earbuds in, when I caught the sound of another set of footsteps behind me. When I looked back, there was a man in a dark green hooded jacket about half a block away, hood up, head down, hands in pockets. It didn't register as a threat. Lots of people wore hoodies. Lots of people walked home late. But what unsettled me was the rhythm. No matter if I slowed down or sped up, his footsteps matched mine exactly. He never got closer, never dropped back, just stayed there, like a shadow tethered to me. I brushed it off as coincidence, but when I reached my apartment, I couldn't shake the unease. I remember double-checking the lock 3 times before I went to bed. The second encounter was harder to ignore. A few nights later, I was heading home around 10:30. As I turned onto the street near my building, I saw him standing across the road under a flickering street lamp. Same green jacket, same posture. Not moving, not smoking, not on his phone. Just standing. It rattled me enough that I called a friend and carried on a loud, fake conversation the rest of the way. When I glanced back before unlocking my door, he was gone. After that, he showed up regularly, twice a week at least. Sometimes across the street near the cafe. Sometimes at the bus stop even after buses had stopped running hours earlier. Sometimes just lingering far enough behind me that I couldn't make out his face. Always the same jacket. Always the hood. Always silent. I started altering my routines. I'd wait inside the cafe until my coworkers left, or I'd take long, winding routes home. Sometimes I begged rides from people I barely knew just to avoid walking alone. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he just lived nearby and wore the same jacket a lot. But deep down, I knew it wasn't coincidence. One night, I was closing with my coworker Jess. We were sweeping up when she paused, staring out the front window. "That guy gives me the creeps," she muttered. I followed her gaze. Across the street, under the glow of the lamppost, he was standing there. Same jacket, same hood. Watching. My stomach dropped. Up until that moment, I'd convinced myself I might be imagining things. But Jess saw him too. It wasn't in my head. Over the next few weeks, little things started piling up. I'd catch movement out of the corner of my eye, only to find nothing there. Once, when I left for work in the morning, I noticed a cigarette butt right outside my apartment door. I don't smoke. None of my neighbors smoked either. It was small, but it gnawed at me. The worst night was when I almost walked right into him. I'd gotten a ride part of the way home and had 1 block left to walk. When I turned the corner, my stomach froze. He was there, not across the street, not lingering a block away. He was standing directly in front of my building's entrance. Hood up, head tilted down, hands still in his pockets. Like he had been waiting for me. My brain went blank except for one thought. Don't let him know which apartment is yours. I forced my hand to pull out my phone and pretended to be on a call. Yeah, I'm almost there. Can you unlock the door for me? I said loudly, making sure he could hear. Then I turned around and walked away like I had somewhere else to be. He didn't move. When I turned the corner, I broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I reached the 24-hour gas station. I stayed there for nearly an hour, pretending to shop, before I worked up the nerve to call a friend for a ride. When we finally pulled up outside my building, he was gone. That was the last time I saw him in person. But the fear didn't leave. For weeks, I lived like a prisoner in my own apartment. I kept my blinds shut tight, slept with a chair wedged under the doorknob. Every knock in the hallway made me freeze. 2 weeks later, I came home from class and saw something that still turns my stomach. Muddy footprints in the hallway. They led right up to my doormat and stopped. No prints going back, just ending there. I stood frozen in the hall, keys shaking in my hand. It could have been maintenance. It could have been a delivery person. But I knew better. I never reported it. What could I have said? A man in a green jacket stood outside my building. He never touched me, never threatened me. It wasn't enough for anyone to take seriously. I moved out 2 months later when my lease ended. I told myself a new apartment in a busier area would make me feel safe again. And mostly, it did. But even now, years later, I still find myself checking over my shoulder at night. My friends laugh because I always want to sit with my back to the wall in restaurants. I can't take night walks without feeling my chest tighten. Every time I see someone in a green hooded jacket, my pulse spikes. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, I catch myself wondering, was he following me home because he was working up the nerve for something worse? Or was watching me enough for him? The not knowing is the part that haunts me. This happened a few years ago, back when I was still swiping through Tinder. It was one of those experiences that really drove home how dangerous online dating can be, and why I eventually swore it off for good. For anyone who's never used Tinder, it's a dating app that shows people nearby. It doesn't give out your exact address, but if you're not careful, it's easy to let someone know too much about where you live. So, I matched with this guy whose profile had basically nothing. No real bio, just a single blurry photo. Normally I wouldn't even give that kind of profile a chance, but he was less than a mile away, and he messaged me first. He said his name was Jay. At the time, I was lonely, and honestly a little vulnerable. He seemed interested in me, asked about my day, and kept the conversation going in a way that felt casual but flirty. He told me he liked curvy women, and after a few photo exchanges, he made it clear he found me attractive. I won't lie, it felt nice to be wanted. After a couple of days of chatting, he invited me over to hang out, play some video games, maybe grab a drink. I wasn't really into meeting random men at their place, so I told him I'd prefer somewhere public. He pushed back a little, but eventually said fine, maybe next time. Then he dropped something that should have been a red flag. He said he was embarrassed to ask, but his mom had left town for the weekend and forgot to leave him grocery money. He asked if I could lend him $20 until payday. I know, it was stupid, but I felt bad for him. I didn't carry cash, so he suggested I use a Cash App. Against my better judgment, I sent it. He thanked me, promised he'd make it up to me, and said he was getting ready to drive over. I showered, got dressed, and texted him that I was ready. He said he was looking for his keys and would leave soon. But after that, nothing. I never heard back. He kept popping online but ignored my messages. Eventually, I accepted I'd been scammed. I wasn't even angry about the money, honestly. I just hated how he went about it. I sent one last message saying that if he had just asked, I probably would have given him the $20 without all the lying. Then I blocked him. A few weeks later, I got another message from a blank profile. This time, it was another guy into curvy women, living close by and wanting to meet. Same script, different name. I immediately got suspicious. We exchanged photos. He sent me a different face, but the conversation turned the same way, asking for money. At that point, I was 95% sure it was the same guy. When I confronted him, he acted confused, called me crazy, then blocked me. For a moment, I felt guilty, like maybe I had jumped the gun and accused someone innocent. But the defensive way he snapped back at me stuck in my head. Over the next couple of months, the pattern repeated. Blank profiles, same flirty opener, same weird money request. It always felt like him. Eventually, I snapped and messaged one of the accounts directly. "What the hell is your problem? Why do you keep doing this?" He came back with, "Say that to my face." I laughed it off and said, "Sure, where and when?" That's when he said, "Be there soon." My stomach dropped. That was the moment it hit me. What if this guy wasn't even really interested in women? What if this was some messed up guy getting off on intimidation? Worse, what if he was violent? I told him he didn't know my address, so nice try. His response chilled me. "Yes, I do, stupid. You just didn't realize you gave it to me. Be ready." My chest tightened. There was one guy I had actually sent my address to, a match from weeks earlier who canceled last minute. What if that had been him all along? I asked what he wanted from me. He replied, "You'll see. I've got something for you." At this point, I was shaking. I lived near a sketchy trailer park across the bayou where the police were always being called for fights and gunshots at night. What if he had a weapon? What if he brought people with him? I typed back, "Yeah? What is it?" His reply, "Something that'll shut you up. I'm outside." My stomach turned to ice. I ran upstairs and peered out my bedroom window, heart hammering in my ears. From where I lived, I could see the whole cul-de-sac. Sure enough, at the very end of the street was a car I didn't recognize, parked with its lights off. I ducked back, barely breathing. My hands shook as I texted, "Okay, then give it to me. I'm waiting." A minute later, "Yeah, I see you. You're gonna get it now." But that was impossible. My blinds were down, and from outside, all you'd see was black glass. He couldn't see me. I waited, frozen, until the car finally pulled away. The next day, I reported everything to Tinder and attached screenshots of the threats. They eventually told me his account had been banned and that they'd contacted local authorities. I never heard from the police, and I never heard from him again. For months, I couldn't sleep properly. Every car that drove by at night made me sit up in bed. I avoided going out alone and checked every parking lot before getting in my car. Now I'm married, and I thank God I don't need dating apps anymore. But I'll never forget how close it felt. That moment of looking out my window and realizing that some stranger had gone from being a blurry profile picture to sitting right outside my house. When I graduated college, I didn't exactly land on my feet financially. I had student loans, a part-time job that barely paid my bills, and no real safety net. Renting a place on my own was out of the question, so I started scouring ads for cheap rooms. That's how I met Randall. He was advertising a room in his apartment for a rent price that almost seemed too good to be true. The place was already furnished, which was a huge selling point since I didn't own much besides clothes, some kitchen basics, and a TV. I figured it was a short-term solution until I got my career going. When I first met Randall, he seemed harmless enough. He was soft-spoken, had a heavy Spanish accent, and carried himself like someone who kept to himself. Not unfriendly, but not exactly warm either. Honestly, I was relieved. Sometimes it's worse to have a roommate who wants to be your best friend when all you want is peace and quiet. The room he showed me was simple. A twin-sized bed tucked in the corner, a small dresser, a closet, and a TV stand. Nothing fancy, but it was livable. What stood out immediately, though, were the stuffed animals on the dresser. There were several, all in a neat little row, with one massive teddy bear sitting front and center, angled so it was staring directly at the bed. I tried to make light of it and asked about them. Randall laughed loudly, almost like I'd told a great joke, and said his room had the same setup. Then he told me it was better to leave them where they were, out of respect for the landlord. I remember that gave me pause, but I brushed it off. I'd known plenty of landlords with weird quirks. Maybe this guy had a thing about keeping the rooms decorated a certain way. As long as it didn't affect me, I didn't care. That first night, after unpacking, I lay in bed with the TV on to wind down. Sometime around midnight, I heard this faint electronic sound, like a tiny click or whir. It was brief, almost unnoticeable. I muted the TV and listened, but the noise was gone. Eventually, I decided it was just some old wiring or the fridge cycling on. It was an old building after all. The next day, Randall was gone when I got home. I didn't know where he worked or what he did, but I assumed he had some kind of job. That night, I heard him come in, walk down the hall, and shut his bedroom door. Later, as I was changing into pajamas, I heard that same sound again, this time louder because the TV wasn't on. It wasn't just a random house creak. It was mechanical, purposeful. I froze, waiting to hear it again, but silence followed. I tried to shake it off. I was still adjusting to a new place, maybe hyper-aware of every noise. I got into bed, read a few pages of my book, and eventually drifted off. The following day, I ran into Randall in the kitchen. He surprised me by asking what book I was reading. At first, I thought it was casual small talk, but then he described it, right down to the cover. That stopped me in my tracks. I asked how he knew, and he casually said he'd gone into my room earlier to grab something he'd left behind, and he saw it on my bed. The thing was, I hadn't left the book on my bed. I always slid it under the frame before leaving for work. That realization made my stomach knot up, but I didn't want to show how unsettled I was. I just told him not to go into my room again. He gave me this little half smile and shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I sat in my room, staring at the dresser, at that line of stuffed animals. The teddy bear's glassy black eyes seemed locked on me. The thought hit me like a punch. What if that noise I kept hearing wasn't the house? What if it was coming from one of them? I tried to laugh it off, but my skin crawled. Eventually, curiosity won out. I got up, picked up the teddy bear, and held it close. My hands trembled as I tilted it toward the light. That's when I saw it. Inside one of the glossy eyes was a small round lens, a camera. I dropped it like it burned me. My whole body went cold. I stormed down the hall and banged on Randall's door, shouting his name. The door was locked, but I could hear faint movement inside. Then, click. His light went out, and silence followed. He was in there, ignoring me. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called the landlord. I told him everything, voice cracking with panic. I said I was leaving that night and I wasn't paying another dime. To my surprise, he didn't argue. He just sighed and said, "Okay." I threw the few things I'd unpacked into bags, grabbed my TV, and hauled everything to my car. As I loaded up, I kept glancing over my shoulder, terrified Randall would come out of his room. He never did. I drove away and never looked back. The landlord never contacted me about rent or breaking the lease. Randall never reached out. It was like the whole thing got swept under the rug. To this day, I can't be around stuffed animals without feeling uneasy. If I see one in someone's house, I turn it so it's facing the wall. That night scarred me in ways I can't really explain. It's not just the invasion of privacy. It's knowing I slept in that room, under the gaze of a camera, while a stranger sat on the other side of the wall watching. If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most, and if you could survive only one of them, which one would it be? Don't forget to drop your guess. Which story do you think was the fake one? Also, if you enjoyed the episode, hit super thanks if you're on YouTube. or send us some stars if you're on Facebook to show some love and make your comments stand out. Want to go next level? Get early access to upcoming episodes, exclusive members-only content, and much more by joining our YouTube membership or becoming a Patreon supporter. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's waiting there for you. Don't forget to like, share, and catch up on our previous episodes. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.